Now we are going to revise SEBI regulations. The first one, SEBI ICDR. First thing is conditions for IPO. That means the eligibility of issuer who can go for initial public offer. Now, before I start with this, a quick recall, which you all should know, but even if you do not know, just have some basic ideas. How can someone or how can a company raise funds through public issue, through bonus, through rights, and through private placement? So, when we're talking about private placement, it is an offer to a specified person, maybe to QIBs, maybe to other persons, other investors. They could be institutional investors, they could be retail investors like us also. And when we are talking about public offer, then public offer means IPO, that is initial public offer, FPO, that is further public offer, and then we have offer for sale. Okay, so the first thing that we are talking about is IPO, right? Now, IPO, that is initial public offer. Who can go for IPO? There are certain eligibility requirements. See, if there is a promoter or a group which is debarred from accessing the capital market by SEBI, then definitely they cannot go for initial public offer. If you don't make an application to stock exchange for approval, you cannot go by that, right? If you haven't made an agreement with depository, no. If you are going for partly paid shares, no, right? Arrangements of finance of towards 75% have not been made, then no, right? If you want to utilize the amount for general corporate purpose of more than 25% of what amount you are raising, no. So your amount that you're raising should be for core purposes that you should have been allocated. If the promoter is a willful defaulter, no, right? Then issue is open for less than 3 days or more than 10 days, so it has to be within that time frame. Or if there is non-compliance of minimum subscription, which ideally is 90%, right? So if these are not met, if these conditions are not met, then you cannot go for IPO. Apart from that, you need to have a merchant banker, you need to have a registrar to issue, you need to have a compliance officer. Now there comes two cases. One is, as I say in my language, that a company which has a good track record, that means that the company which meets the eligibility criteria which is given over here, then you just have to follow the conditions of IPO and you can go ahead with IPO. So IPO is allowed only if you meet these conditions. What conditions? Your tangible assets should be more than equal to 3 crores, of which less than equal to 50% in monetary assets. That means your most of the assets should be in operations, right? Your minimum average pre-tax profit should be 15 crore, 3 out of 5 years. That's how you calculate. Net worth more than equal to 1 crore each preceding 3 year, right? So if you meet these eligibility requirements, great. But if you do not meet this eligibility requirements, can you go through IPO? The answer is yes. But in that case, you have to go through book building. Okay, so you may make IPO if proposed IPO is less than 5 times pre-issue worth and issue through big building and 75% to QIP, right? So because we want that assurance that IPO will not fail, right? Because you're not such a big company. Okay, so if you satisfy the criteria, fine. What criteria? You have to remember it from examination perspective. If you don't satisfy the criteria, this has to be how you are going to do that, right? Now, what is going to be the price of shares in case of IPO? The price is determined in consultation with the lead merchant banker, or price may be built through book building process. When you are not sure of what price our shares can fetch from the market or what demand will be generated, we go through book building process, right? Because book building process is somewhat which elicits demand in the market. So when we're not sure, we go through that book building process, right? So I hope this is clear. Now, differential pricing. Differential pricing is also a topic in which a lot of questions is asked in examination. So, differential pricing is allowed, but it is subject to a limited variation. What variation? Individual investors at a price not lower than 10%. So, whatever price you're offering, 10% lower, not below that, right? Anchor investor not lower than the price that you offer to others. Then shares to employ lower than floor price, but difference not more than 10%. And face value, this is also a very common objective type question which may be asked in examination, is the issue price. What can be the issue price? So minimum issue price can be 1 rupee also, but if your share price, if it is less than 500, if the Amount is less than 500, the face value has to be 10. If it is more than or equal to 500, then the face value not less than 1. So minimum face value has to be 1. This can be asked as an objective type of question also. So what we understand by book building, it is a process to ascertain the prospective quantity and price when we are not sure that what will be willing to be purchased by the buyers, right? So that's how we go for the book building offer. But how do we resolve the pricing issues? We have the guidelines of differential pricing, and we have to keep in mind those guidelines, and on the basis of that guidelines we can go for differential pricing also. Okay, now promoters contribution has to be minimum 20% of post issue capital. Promoters lock in period, we also have a lock in. Promoters contribution has to be locked in for 3 years and for 1 year. I hope you remember that, 3 year and 1 year. Now last, book building allocation. Okay, let me make it more clear. Minimum promoters contribution is locked in for a period of 3 years from the date of commencement of commercial production or date of allotment and public issue, whichever is later. And promoters holding in excess of minimum promoters contribution, that is locked in for 1 year. So minimum promoters contribution is locked in for 3 years, and above that is locked in for 1 year. Then we come to book building. The last topic that we have to read in ICDR is about book building. Now in book building, I have already told you that is the process to elicit demand, to assess the price, right, to determine the quantity, right. Now what we have to remember from examination perspective is 3 things. If book building is happening by eligible entity, that is, I am eligible to go for IPO, that is, I fall under regulation 6(1), and then I'm making book building issue. So what is the minimum allocation to which category? Net offer to public. See, if I divide the whole securities, I have a category of promoters, I have a reserved category, and then comes net offer to public category, in which you have the institutional investors, you have QIBs, right? QIBs are institutional investors only. So you have QIBs, you have non-institutional investors, you have retail investors also. So all these people come in net offer to public category. So what is going to be offered to them? So there we have a limit that if you're going through book building, or if you're not going through book building, how that allocation will be done. So if you're going through book building, more than equal to 35% should be for retail investors, more than equal to 15% to non-institutional investors, and less than equal to 50% to QIBs, out of which 5% to mutual funds. Okay. Now, if you fall under regulation 6(2), that means you're not eligible and you're raising through book building. You do not meet that eligibility requirements. You do not have that good track record. That means you fall under regulation 6(2), sub-regulation 2 of regulation 6. Then what will be, how it will be allocated to net offer to public category? Less than equal to 10% to retail investors, less than equal to 15% to non-institutional, and more than equal to 75%. There also we read that this is the minimum criteria, that at least 75% should be given to QIBs, because we need that assurance, right? So more than equal to 75% to QIBs, out of which 5% to mutual funds. Now, if it is other than book building, then more than equal to 30% to retail individual investors, remaining to other applicants, right? So this is the limit that you need to remember. Okay, now the topic of insider trading, that is prohibition, SEBI PIT regulations, prohibition of insider trading regulations. First thing is, what is insider trading? Trading of securities by insider is kind of insider trading. Now, who is an insider? Insider may be a connected person or the person who has possession of unpublished price sensitive information. The question is, who is connected person? Connected person who is associated with the company or in past 6 months has been associated with the company, maybe even by frequent communication, which allows him access to UPSI, right? Now, we also consider certain persons to be deemed connected person, like the relative, immediate relative of such connected person, then holding, associate, intermediary. In fact, when we talk about the mutual fund, we talk about the investment company, we talk about the stock exchange, right? And the banker of the firm, public financial institution, and such firm, HUF, in which director or banker or his relative has more than 10% stake. They are also called as connected person, right? Now, insider trading is completely prohibited. That is the first thing, that any insider cannot trade. In fact, insider cannot, in the regulation imposes two restrictions. Restriction number one, you cannot share the unpublished price sensitive information. The question is, what is UPSI? The most important definition in this particular regulation has three components: unpublished, price sensitive, and information. Information relating to company and its securities, which is not available to public, that means it is unpublished, and if it is made available, then it will materially impact the share prices or the prices of securities. So it is price sensitive. What could it be? It could be information related to financial results, but it is not restricted to only these. Then dividend, then maybe mergers, acquisitions, change in key managerial personnel, and like things, right? So that is UPSI. Now, any insider who is a connected person or has information about UPSI is not has been told by law that you're not allowed to share this information. You're neither allowed to trade if you have this information, right? So there is restriction on communication of information, as well as there is restriction on trading also. You cannot communicate except for legitimate purpose, performance of duty, or discharge of legal obligation. Okay. So this is one thing. Supposedly you communicate this or you go against the regulations, then it is your burden. That means the onus to prove that you did not have UPSI is on the connected person. However, when we talk about the offense with respect to other persons, the onus to prove that someone has possession of UPSI is on the board. Okay. Now, if we talk about the next thing, that is trading. So, insider is not allowed to trade, but however, insider is entitled to formulate a trading plan, give it to the compliance officer, and thereafter, when compliance officer records approval and he submits it to the stock exchange, you're allowed to trade upon public disclosure, right? So, this is something which is allowed also. That means trading is allowed in certain cases. Then we have two things: code of fair disclosure and code of conduct. Okay, but before that, every listed organization also is required to maintain a structured digital database. See, supposedly for legitimate purposes, you have to share UPSI, right? So you will maintain a digital database where you will share, where you will record the nature of UPSI, the persons to whom UPSI is shared, and all that. So it is going to be a digital database which has to be preserved for at least 8 years. If investigation is going on, then for such higher period, right? Now we come to the next part, that is code of fair disclosure and code of conduct. So first thing that we call code of fair disclosure is applicable in every listed company. So every listed company is going to formulate and publish on its official website a code of practices or procedures, you can say, with respect to disclosure of UPSI, that when you can disclose, how you can disclose. In fact, we have schedule in this regulation, schedule A and B, that we have to read about. So schedule A gives us rule with respect to the same. It says that there should be prompt disclosure to general public of UPSI, because the more you hold a certain information, the more chances of leakage of information is there. Then there should be a senior officer who is going to be designated as chief investor relations officer, who will disseminate this information. There should be proper response to the queries or the rumors which are being generated, and you should develop best practices to record proper meetings. You should not provide UPSI to the analyst, right? So these are the rules with respect to disclosure of UPSI. Then we have Schedule B, which contains the code of conduct. This code of conduct is applicable on designated person, not on everyone, designated person, to monitor their trading. So compliance officer along with the board they recognize some people as designated person and their trading is being monitored. So they cannot trade just like that. They need to obtain pre-clearance from the compliance officer and thereafter they can trade. So compliance officer, I think I have written this right. So, designated person is covered by the code of conduct along with its relatives. Pre clearance needs to be obtained by designated person for trading in securities. Trading window. Supposedly, how compliance officer gives pre-clearance. Compliance officer will ensure that okay, you are a designated person based on your roles, whatever you perform in the organization. We know you are a designated person. You may be exposed to UPSI, so we have identified you as a designated person, and now we are going to monitor your trading. Right? We are going to regulate your trading. So you come to us, and when you come to us for obtaining pre-clearance, we will ensure, and in fact we will take a declaration from you that you do not possess any UPSI. Then we will give you pre-clearance. Okay, fine, you can trade. The trading window is open for 7 days. Within that you have to you have to trade, otherwise you need pre-clearance again. Okay, so prior to approving that, compliance officer will ensure that. In fact, compliance officer reopens trading window even considering a lot of factors. And other than that, code of conduct may also specify the formats, that is the application for obtaining pre-clearance or reporting of trades. Right, so compliance officer will provide reports to the board, most more appropriately audit committee. Fine. Okay, then we also have something called as institutional mechanism, and something called as the disclosures. Disclosure of trading by insiders. We broadly have to read only two disclosures. When KMP is appointed and the securities that he is holding, and if in a quarter your trading exceeds the figure of 10 lakhs, then within 2 trading days you have to disclose that, right? So over any calendar quarter, if it in aggregates it exceeds or is in excess of 10 lakhs, then you have to report that, you have to disclose that. Okay, so that is the obligation to disclose. After that, we also have something called as institutional mechanism. What is institutional mechanism? Institutional mechanism is about audit committee reviewing the compliance, uh, chief executive officer reviewing the compliance, and more importantly, or the most important thing, that every listed company will formulate a policy for inquiry of leakage or suspected leakage of unpublished price sensitive information. Okay, so this is something which is important. In fact, if inquiry is being made, then everyone, all the intermediaries are also going to provide adequate support, and there should be a whistleblower policy also. Okay, so now we move to the takeover code. Okay, takeover code. What is takeover? See, we have an acquirer who is taking control over the target company. So there may be a person who is acquiring control. That person is known as acquire, and the the company whose control is being acquired is the target company. One company is acquiring shares of another company, or maybe one person is acquiring certain shares of another company. That means, ma'am, if we go out and buy a few shares, is it takeover? The answer is no. We go and buy shares and we obtain maybe 10%, 15% control. Is it takeover? The answer is again no. Right? Takeover code hits when you reach the level of 25% or more. However, takeover, the intention or the meaning of takeover is to obtain control, and it is considered that we obtain control when we hit the mark of maybe 25% or more. Right? Fine. Now, we have different types of takeover. Friendly takeover, wherein promoters willingly accepting or willingly want to transfer the securities. Hostile takeover, when the promoter defends that they do not want to transfer the securities, yet takeover is happening. Horizontal takeover, which happens in the same line. vertical takeover, which happens in backward or forward integration, and conglomerate takeover, which is the takeover by a company in absolutely different industry. Okay, now this takeover code is mainly to protect the interest of the investors, because when takeover is happening, more importantly, when maybe hostile takeover is happening, then some management, substantial change in management takes place. There is new set of people who are going to manage the company. They may be having new vision, and the old investors might not want to continue with them. So in such a case, they should be given an exit opportunity, and that exit opportunity is given by way of an open offer or public offer. That is what we call. So when public offer triggers, that is something which is very important. See, open offer are of two types. One is mandatory and one is voluntary. Mandatory open offer, when undoubtedly you have to give a public offer, you don't have a choice. When there are two trigger events. Trigger event number one, or the first trigger point, you can say, acquirer, the person who is acquiring shares or voting rights in the target company. So acquirer plus the persons acting in concert, right? All those who have a common objective or connected, right? They acquire more than equal to 25% voting rights. So the moment you hit the mark of 25%, you are obligated by the code to give a public offer according to regulations for at least 26% of total share capital. So the first thing that you have to do is make a public announcement. Appoint, we will see the process also, open offer process, but you have to give open offer process, open offer. Okay. The second trigger point is, now when you are already holding 25% voting rights, that means somewhere in the past you've already given a public offer. Now you already hold 25% or more voting rights, and you intend to acquire more than 5% in any financial year. So that is the second trigger event, and again you have to give, mandatorily give offer according to the regulation. Supposedly you hold 25% voting rights, and now you intend to acquire only 3% more. That is creeping acquisition. Up to 5% is creeping acquisition, which does not trigger the requirement of public offer. Okay, it does not trigger the requirement of public offer. So there are two trigger events that you have to mandatorily remember. Now, this code requires open offer on occurring of trigger events and some disclosures. What is the open offer process? Whenever the event has triggered, any of the event has triggered, you will appoint the merchant banker. Merchant banker is the manager to this open offer, who will assist or who will undertake the entire process. So first thing that he does is make a public announcement. Within 5 days, a detailed public announcement. But before detailed public announcement, 2 days before, you have to open an escrow account and deposit amount therein. You are not supposed to know what percentage of amount, although I've told you this, but you're not supposed to know it. So don't get into that. We have a very little coverage of the regulations in our syllabus, and I am teaching you, or I'm making you revise according to that syllabus only. Okay, so 2 days before, you have to deposit in the escrow account. Now, after detailed public statement, within 5 days, that draft offer letter which you're going to give to public has to be submitted along with fees to SEBI for their comments or their response. The same draft letter of offer is also sent to the target company and the stock exchanges. Now, SEBI usually responds within 15 days, and when you get the response of SEBI, within 7 days, you give the letter of offer to public. If you don't get a response of SEBI after expiry of 15 days, then within 7 days, you give letter of offer to public. When you get a response within 12 days, that tendering period should start. What is tendering period? The period which is of 10 days in which the shares are being tendered. That means the shares are being sold, provided by the public, right? So that is tendering period. How will the acquirer pay? to public by cash or by issuing shares of acquirer or PAC or by issuing debt instruments or by issuing convertible debt securities. Now, offer once made cannot be withdrawn, but supposedly we did not get statutory approvals that were needed to make this open offer. So, of course, you have to withdraw the offer. Supposedly, the acquirer dies, or maybe there was some condition stipulated in the listing agreement which have been violated. So, or maybe SEBI decides according to merits of the case that yes, withdrawal is needed. So within 2 days, merchant banker will make an announcement in newspaper along with the reasons and also simultaneously inform SEBI stock exchange and target company, right? And the offer will be withdrawn. Okay, the offer will be withdrawn. Now, we also have something called as voluntary offer. Voluntary offer, wherein voluntarily an acquirer wants to give public an offer and acquire their shareholding. But for that, there are certain preconditions. What are the preconditions? That you should prior be holding 25% or more. See, you might be thinking that, ma'am, when we hold 25% of shares, then of course that is the first trigger event and we have to mandatorily make an open offer. So how is it voluntary offer? See, when you hit the mark of 25%, you get the requirement of mandatory open offer. So in the past, you have made that mandatory open offer. Now you're already holding maybe 26% of shares in that company. Now you want to give a voluntary offer. No trigger event has come, so you can do that, subject to there will be no further acquisition in next 6 months. You can also make a conditional offer, and there shouldn't be any creeping acquisition last 52 weeks, that is up to 5%. Okay, so that should not be happening, right? Then we have disclosure. There are 3 disclosures that we have to read. Disclosure number 1, about the promoters. So as on 31st March, whatever is your holding along with PAC, you have to intimate within 7 days of end of financial year to stock exchange and target company. As on 31st March, if there is any person who has 25% or more holding, okay, if your entitlement is 25% or more along with PAC, then you also have to inform within 7 days to stock exchange and target company. And likewise, you also have to intimate about encumbrance. What is encumbrancy? Sometimes what happens is, there are certain securities which are being provided to us as a pledge, as a security. Now, what if the person does not return the loan or repay the loan? Then that security will be ours. And if it will be ours, then maybe I already hold 10% securities in a company, and by way of this encumbrance, I also get 20% more. So it becomes 30%. So there are very high risk involved in encumbrance. So whenever there is creation or invocation of encumbrance, the promoters have to inform to stock exchange and target company. So this is an event based disclosure, that if there is creation of encumbrance, you have to intimate the same to stock exchange as well as the target company, stock exchange as well as the target company. Fine. Now we also have the obligations of acquirer and obligations of target company. Obligations of acquirer, he has to ensure that firm financial arrangements have been made. He should be able to implement the open offer. He should not alienate, that is, dispose of the material assets of the target company. If he wants to do that, then this intention should be prior disclosed in the detailed public statement. If not, then you need to obtain special resolution. Okay, the responsibility of compliance will be on the acquirer as well as the persons acting in concert. If we talk about the obligations of target company, then target company, the directors have to ensure that, okay, there is smooth functioning of the business, ordinary business, right? So that should continue. You will not fix any record date between the tendering period, 3 days prior, 2 days prior, and the tendering period, no record date. And you have to provide information about your shareholders to the acquirer. Okay, so this is the obligation of target company, right?